Before I begin, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly confident in English? Maybe it was a long time ago. Maybe it has never happened yet. That is okay, because this story is for you. My name is Mark, and this is the story of how I found my voice. Not just in English, in life. Listen as many times as you like. Repeat after me when you feel ready. There is no rush. Let's begin. I was 28 years old when I made a decision. A small decision, but it changed everything. I decided to learn English. Not for a test, not for a certificate, for myself, because I wanted to speak to the world, and the world was waiting. Now repeat after me. I decided to learn English for myself. Good. I wanted to speak to the world. Perfect. At first, everything felt impossible. The words were long and strange. The sounds were difficult. My mouth did not know what to do. I remember sitting at my desk one night, looking at a page full of English words, and thinking, I will never understand this. Maybe English is not for people like me. Have you ever thought something like that? I think many of us have. Now repeat. At first, everything felt impossible. The words were long and strange. Well done. But I kept going. Not because I was brave. I was not brave. I kept going because I was curious. Curious means you want to know more. You want to understand. Curiosity is a quiet kind of courage. Remember that. Now repeat. I kept going because I was curious. Curiosity is a quiet kind of courage. Beautiful. In the beginning, I had a simple routine. Every morning, I woke up at 6:30. I made a cup of coffee. I sat by the window. And I listened to English for 15 minutes. Just listened. I did not try to understand every word. I just let the sounds enter my ears. Like music. Like rain on a quiet morning. Now repeat. Every morning I woke up at 6:30. I sat by the window and listened. I let the sounds enter my ears. Good. My teacher always said something I never forgot. She said, Mark, you do not need to be perfect. You need to be present. Present means here, now, paying attention. I wrote those words in my notebook that evening. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be present. And I read them every morning after that. Now repeat those words with me. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be present. Say them again like you mean them. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be present. Remember those words. We will come back to them. The first month was the hardest. I made many mistakes. I said the wrong words. I used the wrong tense. I pronounced things in strange ways. One day at a cafe, I tried to order in English. I wanted to say, "Can I have a coffee, please?" But what came out was something else entirely. The woman behind this counter looked confused. My face turned red. I wanted to disappear. Do you know that feeling? That hot, uncomfortable feeling of making a mistake in front of someone? Most people who learn a language know it very well. Now repeat. I made many mistakes. My face turned red. I wanted to disappear. Well done. But here is what I learned from that moment. The woman at the cafe did not laugh at me. She waited. She was patient. She smiled and said, "Take your time." 3 words. Take your time. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Shifted means changed, slowly, quietly. I realized that most people are kind. They are not waiting for us to fail. They are just waiting for us to try. Now repeat. Take your time. Most people are not waiting for us to fail. They are waiting for us to try. Perfect. After that day, something changed in how I practiced. Before, I only studied alone. At my desk, in my room, in silence. I was afraid to make mistakes in front of others. So I hid. But hiding does not help you grow. A seed does not grow inside a closed box. It needs soil, it needs water, it needs light. And language needs conversation. It needs real people, real moments, real mistakes. Now repeat. Before, I only studied alone. Hiding does not help you grow. Language needs conversation. Good. So I made a new rule for myself. Every week I would speak English to one real person. Just one. Not a long conversation. Just a sentence or two. A small hello. A simple question. A short thank you. Small moments, but real ones. Now repeat. Every week I would speak English to one real person. Just a sentence or two. Small moments, but real ones. Well done. The first person I spoke to was my neighbor, an old man named George. He sat outside his door every afternoon, reading a newspaper. One day I walked past and said, "Good afternoon." My voice was quiet, almost a whisper. He looked up from his newspaper. He smiled and said, "Good afternoon, young man. Beautiful day, isn't it?" I did not know what to say next, so I just nodded and kept walking. But that night I wrote in my notebook, "Today I spoke English to a real person." He smiled. "That is enough. Now repeat. Good afternoon. Beautiful day, isn't it?" That is enough. Perfect. Week by week, the conversations grew longer. George and I began to talk more. He told me about his life, about the places he had visited, about the things he had learned. He was patient with my English. When I used the wrong word, he did not correct me harshly. He just used the right word naturally in his next sentence, so I could hear the difference. That is a beautiful way to teach someone. Not with corrections, with examples. Now repeat. Week by week, the conversations grew longer. He was patient with my English. Not with corrections, with examples. Beautiful. 3 months into my journey, something unexpected happened. I started dreaming in English. Have you ever dreamed in another language? It is a strange and wonderful feeling. In the dream, I was in a market. People were talking around me, and I understood everything. I spoke back, and the words came easily, naturally, like they had always been inside me, waiting to come out. When I woke up, I felt strange, because the dream felt more real than real life. I wrote in my notebook that morning, "The words are inside me now. I just need to let them out." Now repeat. I started dreaming in English. The words are inside me now. I just need to let them out. Well done. But not everything was beautiful. Some days were very hard. Some days I felt like I was going backwards, not forward. I would forget words I knew before. I would make mistakes I had already corrected. I would listen to native speakers and understand nothing. And on those days, a dark voice in my head would say, "You are not improving. You are wasting your time. Give up." Do you know that voice? I think everyone learning something new knows it. Now repeat. Some days I felt like I was going backwards. I would forget words I knew before. Give up, the voice said. Good. On one of those hard days, I went to see George. I sat down next to him and said, I don't think I'm improving. He put down his newspaper. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, Mark, have you ever watched the sea? I said yes. He said, the tide does not always come in. Sometimes it goes out, but it always comes back. Always. I sat with those words for a long time. The tide does not always come in. Sometimes it goes out, but it always comes back. That night I wrote in my notebook, bad days are not the end. They are just the tide going out. Now repeat. The tide does not always come in. Sometimes it goes out, but it always comes back. Bad days are not the end. Perfect. Around this time, I discovered something important. Learning English was not just about grammar. It was not just about vocabulary. It was about identity. Identity means who you are, how you see yourself. When I spoke English, I felt like a different version of myself. Slightly more confident, slightly more open. Like putting on a coat that fits differently. Not uncomfortable, just new. Now repeat. Learning English was not just about grammar. It was about identity. I felt like a different version of myself. Well done. My teacher noticed the change before I did. One day after class, she said, Mark, your English is different now. I said, different how? She smiled and said, before you spoke like you were apologizing. Now you speak like you have something to say. I did not fully understand what she meant at first. But later, walking home, I thought about it. Before, every sentence I said felt like a question. Like I was asking for permission to speak. Am I allowed to say this? Is this correct? Will people laugh? But slowly, without noticing, that had changed. I was no longer asking for permission. I was just speaking. Now repeat. Before you spoke like you were apologizing. Now you speak like you have something to say. I was no longer asking for permission. I was just speaking. Beautiful. 6 months into my journey, I did something that terrified me. Terrified means very, very scared. I signed up for an English conversation group. A group of 10 people, all learning English, all nervous, all pretending not to be nervous. The first session, I barely spoke. I listened to others. I nodded a lot. I smiled when someone made a joke, even when I did not fully understand the joke. But I was there, and being there was the hardest part. Now repeat. I signed up for an English conversation group. All nervous, all pretending not to be nervous. Being there was the hardest part. Well done. In the group, I met a woman named Clara. She was from a different country. Her English was different from mine. Different accent, different mistakes, different rhythm. But when she spoke, everyone listened. Not because her English was perfect. It was not. They listened because she spoke with feeling, with warmth, with honesty. One day I asked her, Clara, are you ever afraid to speak? She laughed and said, every single time. I said, but you seem so confident. She said, confidence is not the absence of fear. It is speaking anyway. I wrote that in my notebook that night. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is speaking anyway. Now repeat those words. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is speaking anyway. Say it again. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is speaking anyway. Remember, Clara, we will come back to her. 8 months in, something happened that tested everything. I was offered a job interview in English, fully in English, for a position I really wanted. My heart jumped when I read the email. Then it sank. Because the interview was in 1 week, and suddenly all my confidence disappeared. Like smoke in the wind. Gone. Now repeat. I was offered a job interview in English. My heart jumped, then it sank. All my confidence disappeared like smoke in the wind. Good. I prepared every day that week. I wrote down possible questions. I practiced my answers alone in my room. I recorded myself speaking and listened back. And every time I listened, I found something wrong. My pronunciation, my grammar, my pauses. I called Clara the night before the interview. I told her I was scared. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mark, do you remember what I told you? Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is speaking anyway. Tomorrow just speak. Not perfectly, just honestly. Now repeat. I prepared every day that week. I recorded myself speaking and listened back. Just speak, not perfectly, just honestly. Perfect. The morning of the interview, I woke up early. I made coffee. I sat by the window, just like I had done every morning for 8 months. And I said to myself, you do not need to be perfect. You need to be present. Do you remember those words? My teacher said them in the very beginning. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be present. Now repeat. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be present. Well done. The interview was hard. There were moments when I searched for a word and could not find it. There were moments when my sentences came out in the wrong order. There was one question I did not fully understand, and I had to ask them to repeat it, which felt embarrassing. But I did not stop. I kept going, like the tide, always coming back. Now repeat. There were moments when I searched for a word and could not find it. But I did not stop. I kept going, like the tide, always coming back. Beautiful. 3 days later, I received an email. They offered me the job. I read the email 3 times. Then I sat very still for a long moment. Then I called Clara. She screamed so loudly I had to move the phone away from my ear. That evening, I went to see George. I told him as a news. He put down his newspaper. He looked at me, and he said, I never doubted you for a moment. I write in my notebook that night, this is not just a job. This is proof. Proof that the small steps work. Proof that the mornings by the window worked. Proof that the mistakes were not failures. They were steps. Now repeat. This is not just a job. This is proof that the small steps work. The mistakes were not failures. They were steps. Well done. On my first day at the new job, I was nervous again. Of course I was. New place, new people, new challenges, all in English, all day. But I remembered what I had learned. Fear is normal. Mistakes are normal. What matters is that you keep going. At lunch, a colleague sat next to me. She said, Where are you from? Your English is really good. I smiled. I said, Thank you. I have been working on it for a while. She said, well, it shows. It shows. 2 words. But they meant everything. Now repeat. Fear is normal. Mistakes are normal. What matters is that you keep going. It shows. Perfect. Now I want to tell you something important. Something I wish someone had told me at the beginning. Learning a language is not a straight line. It does not go only up. It goes up and down, forward and sometimes back. It has good days and bad days, loud days and quiet days, days when everything clicks, and days when nothing does. That is not failure. That is the journey. Now repeat. Learning a language is not a straight line. It has good days and bad days. Days when everything clicks. That is not failure. That is the journey. Well done. There is one more thing I want to share with you. The most surprising lesson of all. Learning English did not just change how I spoke. It changed how I listened. Before, when someone spoke English to me, I was so busy thinking about my answer that I often missed what they were actually saying. I was inside my own head, translating, checking, worrying. But as my confidence grew, something shifted. I started actually listening to the words, to the feeling behind the words, to the person in front of me. And that changed everything. Because language is not just about speaking. It is about connection. Now repeat. Learning English changed how I listened. I started actually listening to the person in front of me. Language is not just about speaking. It is about connection. Beautiful. It has now been 1 year since that first morning. The morning I sat by the window with my coffee and decided to learn English for myself. I am not perfect. I still make mistakes. I still have days when words escape me. But I am not the same person I was a year ago. That person was afraid of his own voice. This person, the one speaking to you now, has learned to trust it. Now repeat. I am not the same person I was a year ago. That person was afraid of his own voice. This person has learned to trust it. Perfect. Last week I went back to the same cafe, the one where I tried to order coffee a year ago, and turned red with embarrassment. The same woman was behind the counter. I walked up and said, "Good morning. Could I have a large coffee, please? Black, no sugar, and maybe one of those pastries in the window." She smiled and said, "Of course." Coming right up. I paid. I found a table by the window. I sat down. I looked out at the street, and I thought, this is what a year of small steps looks like. Not a miracle, not magic, just one morning after another, one word after another, one conversation after another. Now repeat. Good morning. Could I have a large coffee, please? Black, no sugar, and maybe one of those pastries in the window. This is what a year of small steps looks like. One word after another, one conversation after another. Well done. So, my friend, as this story ends, I want to leave you with something. Not advice, just a few words from someone who has walked this road. You will have hard days. You will make mistakes. You will feel like giving up. Those feelings are real, and they are allowed. But please, keep going. Not because it will be easy, but because it will be worth it. Now repeat these final words with me. I will have hard days. I will make mistakes, but I will keep going because it will be worth it. One more time. Say it like you mean it. I will keep going because it will be worth it. Thank you for listening to this story. You just practiced your English for 35 minutes. You listened, you repeated, you stayed. That is not small. That is exactly what Mark did. One morning at a time. I'm Mark. This is Fluentjoy. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. We are here every week. Keep going. See you next time.